The Diocese of Davenport, Iowa. The story of the faith in this region began with the devotion and generosity of the town's principal founder, was sustained by a visionary bishop with a deep devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and is still being written today under the leadership of its current apostle, Bishop Robert Zinkula.
You're walking with people in their daily lives. There's joys, there's sorrows. The sacraments touch on all those different aspects of our lives, and it's like a family. I told people here when I came here, and I'm going to love this parish unconditionally and sacrificially. This is my family.
This is the story of the bishops of America, the shepherds of the past and the shepherds of today, who through their callings and ministry carry the church into the future. It's also the story of their parish, their church, the cathedral. This is The Chair, an exploration of what it means to be an apostle in America. In southeastern Iowa, in the heartland of our country, is the town of Davenport, Iowa. See City of the Diocese of Davenport.
The Diocese of Davenport encompasses an area of almost 12,000 square miles and serves a Catholic population of nearly 100,000 people in the area. It's a town that has a very rich frontier history going back to its founder, Antoine Leclerc. Antoine was a very interesting character. His father was a French-Canadian, his mother was Native American, and as a result, he spoke over a dozen Native American languages in addition to English, French, and Spanish. Because of his linguistic abilities, he ended up being an interpreter for the United States Army as well.
In the early 1830s, a conflict broke out between the U.S. government and the Sauk and Meskwaki tribes over huge swaths of land along the Mississippi River. This has become known as the Black Hawk War. Now, Antoine Leclerc was highly respected by both sides, and in this conflict, he functioned as the interpreter. Once the conflict had ended, the tribes granted he and his wife Marguerite 3 large parcels of land on the stipulation that he agreed to build his first house on the location where the Black Hawk Treaty was signed. He did. Leclerc built a small log structure on the site in 1833. And then in 1855, Marguerite and Antoine build this beautiful Italianate mansion, which still exists to this day, Leclerc House. In 1836, Leclerc founds the city and names it after his friend, George Davenport. Davenport was a former English sailor who served in the U.S. Army during the War of 1812.
He strikes me as a very gentle man. At the end of this terrible battle, because of the work that he did on behalf of the Native American communities, they gave him extraordinary parcels of land along the banks of the Mississippi. What strikes me as incredible is Leclerc then gives some of this land so that we could build a church. Leclerc donates the money for St. Anthony's Parish, which is the first church in Davenport, Iowa. It's founded by a Dominican friar, Samuel Mazzucchelli.
Venerable Samuel Mazzucchelli was a pioneering Italian Dominican friar and Catholic missionary priest. He founded over 30 parishes in the Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin area. Father Mazzucchelli was known for his profound kindness. He had an ability to break down cultural barriers between the different groups that lived in this tri-state area. In 1993, Pope John Paul II declared Mazzucchelli venerable.
As an architect, he was kind of a Renaissance kind of a guy. He started a lot of churches all over the place, Iowa, Wisconsin. I just think about the two of them. I just would have loved to be around to see. So they're on horseback, they're canoes, and when I think about my challenges, it's like, man, it's nothing compared to.
The Catholics of Davenport were originally under the jurisdiction of the Diocese of Dubuque. founded in 1837 with Bishop Matthias Loris as its first bishop.
And Bishop Loris, that was back when the Dubuque Diocese it's like all of Iowa, Minnesota, the Dakotas. Because of the Mississippi, people came up the river trapping and mining and fishing and everything. There was French early on, and then a lot of Irish and Germans eventually, very Catholic area. So along the river, it's probably the most Catholic part of the Davenport Diocese and the Dubuque Diocese because of those early immigrants.
As the Catholic population in Davenport grew, it became clear that St. Anthony's was not large enough. A second parish was needed, and again, Antoine Leclerc was ready to help. He donates another parcel of his land for Davenport's second church, St. Margaret's.
Antoine Leclerc is the founder of Davenport, was instrumental in St. Margaret as our original parish built in 1856. It was a church that he subsidized, that he built, he gave us the land for. He named it St. Margaret after his wife, Marguerite, and it was after St. Margaret of Scotland.
The Catholic population in Davenport begins to grow in the 40s and 50s. The neighborhoods around St. Margaret's Church becomes known as Cork Hill as a nod to their Irish roots in County Cork back home. Many of these immigrants were laborers who were working on the railroads, and as the population grows, what the hierarchy realizes is they're going to have to separate from the Diocese of Dubuque, and they do so, creating its own see in Davenport. In 1881, when Pope Leo XIII establishes the Diocese of Davenport, he names the very Reverend John McMullen of Chicago as its first bishop. At that time, the diocese is now half the state of Iowa. Bishop McMullen comes to Davenport from Chicago, where he had established a number of social service agencies for the poor, the destitute, the orphaned. Brings this passion and concern for people when he arrives in Davenport as its new bishop. Unfortunately, his tenure is only 2 years as he dies from cancer. He is then succeeded by Henry Cosgrove, who is perhaps the most beloved bishop in Davenport's history. Bishop Cosgrove serves the Diocese of Davenport for 22 years. He was, in a sense, a moral crusader in the diocese as well. What he is best known for is his deep devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus.
Henry Cosgrove was ordained for the Diocese of Dubuque, and he actually becomes the pastor of St. Margaret's Church in 1861. About 20 years later, when Davenport is named a diocese, Cosgrove is named the first rector of the cathedral. During his years as the second bishop of the diocese, his most lasting contribution to the Church of Davenport was the building of Sacred Heart Cathedral. In 1889, Bishop Cosgrove decided that a new, larger church should be built to accommodate this growing population. He knew that it was time for the Diocese of Davenport to build a cathedral that would last for generations. Now, Cosgrove also had this profound devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And so he petitions the Vatican to rename the cathedral from St. Margaret's to Sacred Heart. Rome approved his request, but they have a stipulation where they say, yes, you may do so, but also there must be a chapel in the church which is dedicated to St. Margaret. Now, this chapel exists in Sacred Heart Cathedral to this day.
When the church was made a diocese in 1887, it was decided that St. Margaret's was too small for the cathedral, so Sacred Heart was built. It was built as a cathedral. The building itself is stately. When you drive by, when you look at the cathedral, that it makes a statement just in its structure itself.
As you approach the Cathedral of the Sacred Heart in Davenport, Iowa, one of the really striking features is this fortress-like structure, and then this really delicate tracery of the rose window on the front. So the imagery of the rose always relates to Our Lady, but then also these petals, which is a wonderful, and the most famous probably rose windows at Notre Dame and at Heart Cathedral. But the stained glass, which sort of filters light in this sort of dappled way, is also instructive. It's decorative.
We set aside sacred space for churches in general, and who's to say it's more sacred here than like over across the street? We've claimed this space for God, and we've dedicated it to God. And so in this case, we've dedicated this particular church as our cathedral.
The picture that was honor of St. Margaret of Scotland hung over the altar in the original St. Margaret's Church. When Sacred Heart Cathedral is built, there was a chapel built to it, St. Margaret's Chapel. And I think it ties in well with the devotion to the Sacred Heart in our name, Sacred Heart, because it was St. Margaret of Alacoque. She had the vision of the Sacred Heart, and thus the devotion began.
The Sacred Heart Cathedral is a Victorian sort of Gothic revival cathedral. It has a basilica style, which is rectangular, and then the sanctuary area has a sort of chancel. One of the really notable features of this cathedral is the woodwork on the ceiling and the attention to the patterning, all of which has a sort of craft feeling, very much done with love. The apostles are featured in the stained glass, and it brings a great deal of color into it. It's truly captivating. And stained glass always also has this jewel-like effect, and so it recalls the walls of the New Jerusalem, which is in heaven.
After everybody's gone and I come back into the church late at night, I walk around the church, and I think when I feel the presence most is when I walk down the aisle. You can just feel the communion of saints throughout the cathedral, and looking up at that beautiful stained glass above the altar, St. Margaret of Alacoque, and the Sacred Heart given, just the rays of blessing and love that come down to her. There's just something so special about that I feel that presence.
There's symbolism in so much in the church, and to set aside a church that the seat of the bishop, it symbolizes his role as a bishop and three Munera, priest, prophet, and king. It's having a chair, there's something about that it all emanates from there.
Thomas Zinkula grew up on a family farm in Mount Vernon, Iowa, with 8 siblings.
My dad and uncle farmed together, so my dad had 9 kids. My uncle was a bachelor, so they shared the work and they shared the incomes. It becomes part of you. I was only on 18 years, but it becomes part of you. You become part of it when you work the land. And so I can be kind of sentimental about that. One of my brothers has a house on a hill so it's like 20, 25 acres. You can see our old farmhouse across the fields. It's like not much more than an hour from here. That's where I go, when I'm tired and I need a break. That does it for me. I work out there, there's always something to do. It's just being outdoors, and that's why I came to know God, was out in that wide open space. That's kind of being formed in the faith. I could experience God out there. That's a huge piece of who I am.
A graduate of Cornell College in Mount Vernon, Zinkula was an outstanding scholar and football player.
I grew up on a farm, and the oldest boy, and I was aware of football, and we'd throw it around and stuff, but I didn't know it like the town kids did. But so I kind of started peaking later on in high school, and then I played in college. It's Division III, liberal arts school, and so I was there for studies and everything. But it was fun to have this thing on the side.
After college, he built a successful career as an actuary and lawyer before answering the call to enter the seminary and study for the priesthood.
I was in a large firm in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and so I was kind of figuring out where I fit in. So I actually did a lot, probably half litigation oriented, did a lot of insurance defense work, and then half more business oriented. So I did a lot of different things, which is good because I can draw on all that now, the variety of experiences. I was 28 when I discerned that I was being called to the priesthood. So then I think I was 29 by the time I entered seminary the next year. I was about ready to become partner and make the big bucks. The priesthood wasn't on my mind at all, not at all. And so I was dating and and figured I'd marry. And I enjoyed practicing law. It wasn't that, and it was going fine, but there's something missing. So I prayed pretty regularly, and it just still, I was like, what is it that you wanted me to do, God? And so I had an experience in October of 1985 where it's like, boom, it was in the middle of the night, and I woke up, and God was hitting me over the head with it. And, it's like, where is this coming from, But it was exciting, and it was real, and I didn't hear any voices or see any visions. Just, this is what I need to do. I prayed about it. I started going to daily mass on my way into the office, and it stayed real. 2 months later, the day after Christmas, I made an appointment with a former pastor who was now Vicar General in Dubuque, and we had lunch, and he was the first person I told, and I was in the vocation director's office that afternoon, and seminary the next fall.
Bishop Zinkula was ordained on May 26, 1990. He soon took on a variety of pastoral and administrative duties within the diocese.
I was associate pastor in a parish, 3 years in one parish and 3 years in another parish in Dubuque. Because of my law background, they asked if I would work in the chancery in the tribunal, and then I ended up going, to study canon law after that. What I enjoy about parish life is walking with people in their daily lives. There's joys, there's sorrows. As pastor, my way of relating to parish would be in a spousal context, and this is my spouse, and I'm going to love this parish unconditionally and sacrificially. This is just kind of where my heart has always been.
After further appointments as judicial vicar and then as rector for St. Pius X's Seminary in 2017, Thomas Zinkula received a call informing him that he had been chosen as the next bishop of the Diocese of Davenport.
It was Palm Sunday. I was rector of the seminary at that point. There was a message on my phone and kind of accented voice saying it's the nuncio. And I actually thought that those guys was a prank. So I actually looked on the internet and tried to find his phone number, but of course I think he was using his cell phone. So I had a little time to go to the chapel and pray, and I finally returned the call. And I'm thinking I'm probably going to say yes, but I still wanted to give it a little bit of thought, and so I asked him if I could have a little time to think about it. So this is early evening when we're talking, and he said, well, how about later this evening? And I was thinking a couple days, Okay, fine. And then it ended with him saying, but are you thinking about saying yes? So, yes, I am thinking about saying yes. So. I wake up in the morning sometimes and remember you're the bishop. It's like, oh gosh. And after 2 or 3 weeks, it's like, I'm not, heck with that. I'm just gonna be who I am. I liken it to being a pastor. I mean, as a pastor, you're pastor of a parish, and there's however many people there are, parishioners, and you're kind of a pastor. You're pastor of a diocese, so I need to be the spiritual leader, spiritual father of, in this case, priests and deacons and the whole flock. What I like to do is just kind of show up somewhere, sometimes as bishop. Some parish festival, or there's a 5K run. Wow, the bishop's here running, and just show up and surprise people. Just being out there and with people, and like you would as a parish priest, because I miss that, and so I try to find opportunities to there are some that are part of the job anyway, confirmation, there's school masses, and there's all these kinds of things, but I look for other opportunities.
For Bishop Zinkula, central to being a Christian is the virtue of hope and the deep belief that God is with us as we look towards the future.
Supposedly the glory days, like in the 50s, there's all these priests and all these people, immigrants and practicing hard and all that. And I'd rather be alive now, a priest, a bishop now. Even as challenging as it is, as hard as it is, it's so important, the role that we're playing, and it's hard, but it requires more creativity and imagination, because you have to do things, figure out a new way of being church, given the signs of the times, and I like that. I mean, it's a hassle, but I also like that. I love kind of, a new challenge and figuring something out, together.